Sounds a lot like a place we find ourselves in today in the West. Everyone does what was right in their own eyes. And so the people are looking to God for some kind of answer. For the despair they feel, I think is the right word, despair. And Hannah, being in that lineage of God's people, is expecting to have a child, and maybe her child can be part of that answer. But hear what happens to Hannah. We start in verse 4 of chapter 1. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Her rival used to provoke her severely to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year after year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made this vow, O Lord of hosts, if only you will look on the misery of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a male child, then I will set him before you as a Nazirite until the day of his death. He shall drink neither wine nor intoxicants, and no razor shall touch his head. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli the priest observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, How long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Put away your wine. But Hannah answered, No, my Lord, I am a woman deeply troubled. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time. Then Eli answered, Go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your sight. Then the woman went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I have asked him of the Lord. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Sometimes it's difficult to hear these ancient stories from people thousands of years ago. Stories that we hear in a very old book. Sometimes we wonder just exactly what was going on in the minds of people back then in a different society, in a different context. Sometimes because it's so far removed from us, we don't necessarily hear the emotion of the characters that are our mothers and fathers of our faith. I mean, Hannah is a mother of our faith, so to speak. So to help us feel Hannah's emotion just a little bit better, I want to share with you a story of a modern-day Hannah, a lady by the name of Marlo Shaleski, who wrote a book called Empty Womb, Broken Heart. And I want you to hear her words, as maybe hearing her words will give us a little bit better understanding of how Hannah felt.
For me, it was Mother's Day, of all things. You know, we're talking about mothers. It was one Mother's Day. My husband was doing the worship leading, and I had to show up to church. Oh, not happy. It's like, okay, fine. All the mothers were brought up with all the roses and carnations, and I was sitting there like always, like every year, in the back with the men and the children, thinking, Look at me. It's only me. And that day, I decided I'm going to sit in the very back because I don't like it. And my husband had chosen a song that I didn't know about, My Jesus, I Love Thee. And there's a line in there, if ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. And God broke my heart with that song. Now, when mothers are being honored, when all my dreams are shattered, when you haven't done for me this one simple thing that I've wanted, God was whispering, can you sing it to me today? Today will you sing to me? I thought, oh, I don't know. But then I started little by little to sing, and tears coming down my face singing, if ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. If you never give me a child, I'm still going to sing this song, and you're going to be enough. Somehow. I don't see how it's going to happen. Somehow, God, you will be enough.
And what happened after that?
Shortly thereafter, I got pregnant with my first. It was I think I went the next week and found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
It was after those 11 years of every month
But
not
really
being
just
pregnant.
submitting, just dying to yourself. Right?
Dying.
Yeah.
The
And
road
it was
has been
hard.
hard
It has
all
been
the
hard.
way. But can we show the picture of what you're enjoying today? Your biggest
Here we are.
surprise came at the age of 40. You don't mind?
She had her last little boy at 40. But for 11 years, she says, month after month after month, not having a child, and that feeling and that experience that she had that day before God. Maybe this gives us a better understanding of who Hannah was and how Hannah felt thousands of years ago. Maybe you already were feeling a little bit of Hannah's pain. If you've ever experienced the burden and the pain of infertility, 1 in 6 Americans, couples, suffer from some form of infertility. So maybe that's been an experience that you've had in your life. Maybe you know someone or you yourself were never able to have the child that you hope to have. But even if you've never been through that, the point of this is that all of us can identify somewhat with Hannah. When we've brought our prayer to God and prayed for something, as she says, just that little thing, God. And yet, God doesn't answer our prayer. And year after year after year, our hope ends in disappointment. Or for some of you, day after day after day, your hope and your prayer ends in disappointment. You probably have experienced what it feels like to not be heard by God, to have in some way your prayers go unanswered. And if you haven't, part of being human is that one day, unfortunately, we will. You will. You'll be in a place where, like Hannah, like Marlo, God, just that one little thing, if you could just do that one little thing. I think I've shared this story with you before, but it's important to hear it again whenever we talk about women in the Bible and their inability to have children, because it's a different context than we experience here in this society. When Starla and I were in Kenya, we would travel around to these youth meetings, and the youth leader in this area, who is a Methodist pastor, would answer questions from the teenagers that they might have. And it was done by them writing on little notes and putting it in a hat, in the same way that maybe you remember when you had those uncomfortable conversations in high school with teachers or middle school or whatever it was for you. And so the leader would take out these questions and would answer them. And a lot of them were the same kind of questions that teenagers here in this country would have. But occasionally there were questions that were so different from anything I ever experienced that I remembered that I was in a different place.